Hello, and welcome back to Out in the Woods. It's me, your friendly neighborhood host, Jacob, and I am so thrilled to be back at the very pretty, very haunted Red Jasper to actually interview the woman who made it all happen, the Reverend Brandiilyne Mangum-Dear, or BB as we lovingly know her. Say hi, BB.
Hi, BB. How are you?
It's so good to have you here. I have really wanted to interview you for a long time, but of course you're a very busy woman, as my guests are about to find out. You have a lot of irons in the fire in your life. So we're going to get into that. But first things first, introduce yourself. Who are you and where are you from?
I am Brandiilyne Mangum-Dear, as you said, BB. Everybody calls me BB. I'm from, gosh, I don't like to tell people where I'm originally from, so I just say Laurel. I'm from Laurel. Mm-hmm. But I live in Hattiesburg now, so I'm from Mississippi. I don't know if that comes through as I speak to you, but I'm from Mississippi.
You talk a little bit more proper than some of the folks around here.
It'll get worse, I promise.
Yeah, like every Southerner, the madder and or drunker we get, the more our accent just really starts falling out,
Or when we get around one another.
Exactly.
And someone has a really thick drawl.
Yes. Yeah, I can't tell you, living away from home for so long, moving back home, I'm still keeping it mostly under control, but sometimes that drawl will come out, and I don't even mean for it to happen. So, BB, where do you fall on the LGBTQIA plus spectrum?
I'm a big L lesbian. Yes.
Excellent. And when did you know you were different?
Well, that's an interesting story. I had my first experience with a girl when I was about 12, 11 or 12. She was like my best friend. We played softball together, of course, because, all lesbians play softball. And we got caught, and it was really bad. And from that point, that's when I kind of started using drugs to try, because I lost my best friend. I was shamed. All those things happened, and trying to be straight, yeah. It's
a different kind of trauma.
It is. Mm-hmm.
And it's like you said, it hits on so many different levels whenever you have this identity crisis, and then the people that you leaned on have been ripped away from you, and then the people that are left to lean on don't want you to have this identity crisis. They just want you to fit in this box.
Right.
Now this was not in the questions that I sent you, but how involved were you with the church when you were growing up?
Well, we had, church wasn't a huge deal for us. I mean, my grandmother built a church. We shared a church.
Oh.
We lived in the woods. When I tell you, I'm from Chapel, Mississippi, and I'm certain no one's ever heard of it. If you have, I apologize. But it was all family. We all lived, within walking distance, and we shared a church. And this church, when I tell you, you could see the ground through the floor. It was an old building. And so my grandmother built a church on her property. So it was our family church, and it was named after our great-grandfather, named after her husband, her late husband. And so we all went to church, and it was all cousins, and we all, a little Methodist church, nothing but family. I laid on the back pew and wrote my name in the, the books or whatever. And so, it wasn't a huge deal, but something about being in the South, whether you're really involved in church or not, it's in the tapestry. It's in the DNA of being, Southern.
It was always weird for me growing up whenever I would meet people and I'd be like, what church? That's another thing, the Southern question. What church do you go to? Mm-hmm. And sometimes I would have friends that was like, no, my parents don't really go to church. And I'd be like, what? Y'all don't participate in the community every Sunday? What do you do? Do you just stay in your house? I don't know. I couldn't fathom what people did on a Sunday if they weren't at church when I was younger.
Right.
But, yeah, I was like, they always just get lunch before everybody else. No. So when did you become involved in activism, and when did Showtime take notice?
Well, I got involved in the church.
Mm-hmm.
I had this radical experience with God. When I tell you I had a radical experience with God, it was a spiritual awakening like nothing I can even put into words. And I wanted, after that happened, I knew I had to do something. So the church was the only thing, that was like the only option. If you wanted to do anything for spirit, it had to be in the church. That was the only place to do it. And that was in 2012, I think.
Very recently.
And, no, not 2012. 2003, excuse me.
Oh, okay.
I left the church in 2012, excuse me. In 2003, and I quickly became a pastor, built a huge ministry. And I had a ministry for drug addicts and alcoholics. I opened a recovery center for women. And my pastor, I had several facets of that ministry. I had for drug addicts, alcoholics, anger management. We had a youth department. We had an Overeaters Anonymous type division of it. So it was all about, addictions and things like that.
Was it successful?
It was wildly successful. My ministry took over the whole third floor of the church.
Wow.
I built a network across the entire state with the jails and prisons and judges and things like that. And they would send me the people coming out of the jails. They would send me people that had drug charges. They would send me the domestic charges, and they would all come through my ministry. And a couple of years before I started leaving the church, my pastor wanted me to. I had a lot of LGBT people come through because that's what we did. We used drugs to try and be straight.
Yes.
And we tried to numb those, our real self. And so I had a lot of gay people come through. And our church started filling up with, gay people. And people started saying, now, Pastor, we can't have people like this. And my bishop said, as long as they're willing to change, they can come to our church. So the pressure was on me to kind of create a Exodus type ministry piece of my ministry to make the people straight and pray the gay away and those types of things.
How did you feel about it at the time?
I followed my pastor. If he told me to do something, I did what he told me to do, and so I was willing to do that. And one day, one of my girls in my ministry died of an overdose, and she was a lesbian. And that is the moment I was standing in the choir loft, practicing before church on a Sunday morning, singing a song, and the words were, "I'll say yes, Lord, I'll say yes. Where you lead me, I will go. I'll say yes, Lord, I'll say yes." And that's all the song says. And as I'm singing this song, I'm having a supernatural vision in that moment, and God is saying to me, I want you to reconcile my people back to me. They've been exiled, they've been ripped apart, they've been abused, and and he was speaking to me, he or she, I don't like to give God a gender, was speaking to me about the LGBT community. And I'm standing there singing the words, I'll say yes, all the while inside of myself I'm going, I don't understand I don't know, that goes against everything I've been taught. So I'm having this, talk about an identity crisis.
Yeah.
I'm having another identity crisis.
Yeah.
And so I basically said, okay, I'll do this. And but it was 2 more years that I was in the church, and I could not leave. I didn't know how to leave. It was very controlling, very, type of church. So anyway, I told God, I said, you're going to have to move me. And once I got my recovery center opened, secretary, I need a gym to donate memberships for my girls so that, when they're coming off the drugs, they can be healthy and blah, blah, blah. And she said, oh, come with me. And she took me to Susan's gym. And that is where I met Susan.
And who is Susan, by the way, for my
Susan
audience?
Is my wife. Susan is
Okay,
my wife.
yeah.
Now she's my wife. She and Susan's very intimidating. She's an intimidating force. You could just. She's kind of a scary, intimidating person.
I've never found Susan scary. I have just always found her very forthcoming, very forward, very straight to the point. What
Absolutely.
you see is what you get. Yeah.
Absolutely. When I walked into her gym, she knew who I was,
Mm-hmm.
and she knew that I was, participated in trying to make people straight.
Mm-hmm.
And so she was sitting back in her chair with her arms folded, glaring at me over her glasses, and I'm kind of standing behind my secretary at this point thinking, oh God, and so I'm telling her what I want. I need, donations for these girls. There were 10 of them, and anyway, she said, I'll have to put a pen to paper and run the numbers, and I will let you know. And I said, well, let me join your gym. I'll join, and here's my money, and I'll pay the... And so, anyway, she started questioning me. We started talking. We started having conversations. And, she did, like you said, very forthcoming. She asked the hard questions and that I didn't know how to answer. But at any rate, I fell in love, just fell head over heels in love with her. And you have to understand, talking about a scandal, I was married to a man, which I had done a couple of times prior to, because I was trying to, be straight. But I was in a marriage, and I'm a pastor, and I'm falling in love with a woman in South Mississippi. Everything's falling apart. And I'm like, this is insane. But I knew it was right. And one day, I went to tell Susan. I told Susan how I felt. And in my mind, there was music in the background in slow motion, and it was a beautiful thing. So when I told her, she raised straight up and she said, hell no. And I was like, oh, that's not what I expected.
No.
She said, I'm not going to let you ruin your life. I'm not going to let you do that. You have this great life. You're doing a great thing, a great work. And if if we do this, it'll destroy you and your life. Which was very, I understand why she said it. But
was it great or was it comfortable?
Right, exactly. I mean, I believe that I was supposed to do what I did. I was supposed to be there, and then this next piece had to happen to get me to where I am now. Mm-hmm. So I walked into my pastor's office and said, I'm leaving the church. I'm leaving Luke, and that was my husband's name. Mm-hmm. I'm leaving, and I'm done. And he said, you're having a midlife crisis. I said, I'm 38. I'm not having a midlife crisis until I'm at least 50.
Yes.
And so, interestingly enough, he and his wife took me to his house and kept me there and wouldn't let me leave. And so they were, of course, trying to figure out what was going on. They thought that I had a demon. They thought that I was, possessed, all these things. So the ministry team is making plans, trying to figure out what to do to, get me back to my senses. Mm-hmm. It was a big mess. And finally I got out, left, and went to Susan's, long story short. And that's when it all really got bad. The church people began to attack me on social media. It was really, really bad. They threw all of my stuff outside of the gym. They packed up all of my stuff and threw it outside of the gym. They went into my office, got all of my books and things and burned them. It was really bad.
Oh my God.
And my pastor got up in the pulpit and outed me to everyone that Sunday and said, Brandiilyne is no longer a member of this church. She has left her husband for a woman. They contacted all of my colleagues and told them that I was back on drugs, which was not true, and that I was no longer a member of their church and no longer a part of. Anyway, they destroyed my
everything. They alienated you.
Yes.
At that point, they just reduced you to just you and Susan at that point.
Absolutely. And the ministry that I built, when I tell you it was huge, it was wonderful. It's still there. It's still going. Mm-hmm. And they erased my name from it completely. You can't find my name on it. And I founded it. I named it. I built it from the ground up. So anyway, I had been the editor of the Laurel Leader Call. Was a really good friend of mine. He had been following me around for 12 weeks doing articles on the ministry, doing different stories. He did a 12-week series on the ministry, and so we got really close, he and I. And he was watching social media and being, a reporter. He called me and he said, "BB, what's happening? What's going on?" And I told him, and he came to see me, and he said, "Do you want to do a story on this? Do you want to? We can blast this and do." And I said, "No, I don't want to bring harm to the church. I don't want to bring harm to the ministry that I built. I don't want to do that." And he said, "When you're ready, let me know." And I just wasn't, I didn't want to do that. It didn't feel, well, man, after a while, it got so bad that I was traumatized by the spiritual abuse, and it was bad. At any rate, Showtime was looking to do this documentary, and they got in touch with the Laurel Leader Call because of a story that they had done about two lesbians. And when they called and they told them what they were looking for, they immediately said, "You've got to meet Brandiilyne." And so and this was several months after. So
it was still kind of fresh for you when they contacted you.
Very fresh. And they were in my living room that week within a few days and doing an interview. And so, yeah, they chose us. They chose Mississippi to do the documentary. And that's how it started.
And what is that documentary called for my audience?
L Word, Mississippi, Hate the Sin. Mm. Yeah. And it won a GLAAD award. We won a GLAAD award.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So.
Wow.
It's a long story, I
No.
know.
It was worth all of it. So did being a part of L Word, Mississippi change your life in any way? I guess, you led me right up to it. So now we are at this point where it's several months after you've been completely exiled. Now Showtime has taken notice of you. You're a part of this big documentary. So where do we go from here? What changed for you? Everything changed.
We started the Dandelion Project while we were filming the documentary, and the Dandelion Project was an LGBT, just a support group in small town Mississippi, which was, we had just 30 to 40 people in our living room every single week. Mm-hmm. We had no idea there were that many gays in Laurel, Mississippi. And
check Grindr.
Right. And so anyway, we did that, and that's how we got involved in the activism. Was the Dandelion Project started getting involved. But when the documentary aired, we sat up. Susan and I did not go to sleep that night because we kept getting message after message after message, and we were answering every single message and email that we got. Mm-hmm. And it was then that we decided it's time to start the church. It's time to start the church that God called me to do in that moment. Mm-hmm. In the choir. And so that is how we started out calling it the Dandelion Project Ministries. Mm-hmm. So it was just going to be a branch of the Dandelion Project. And then the MCC Church took notice and contacted me. And I had no idea there was a church denomination for, queers, right? It was, it opened up a whole world to me.
Yeah.
And I had no idea.
So I was going to say that leads right into my next question. Let's talk about Joshua Generation. So what is it, and where did the moniker come from? That's actually something I've always personally been curious about. So,
Joshua Generation is the church. We changed the name, and I'll tell you, I may cry because I had a dream, and in my dream, I was pregnant, and I grabbed my Bible and started flipping through the Bible to find a name for the baby. And I knew, and I'm a dreamer, and I knew that this was not a physical pregnancy. I knew that this was a spiritual thing. Mm-hmm. I was aware of that. And I'm flipping through the Bible, going Isaiah, Ezekiel, and Spirit said to me, Joshua. Mm-hmm. And I looked up and said, Joshua's good. And I continued to flip through the Bible to look for a name. Mm-hmm. And Spirit said audibly, to the point it woke me up out of my sleep, Joshua. And that is the moment that God started showing me this vision of a Joshua generation. And Joshua escaped Egypt. Moses came and took, the Israelites out of Egypt. And Joshua was a young boy. And Joshua became Moses's, student.
Right.
And Joshua ended up being the one that led Israel into the promised land because people couldn't change their minds.
Yeah.
And they were stuck in that mindset. Mm-hmm. And so they died walking in circles. Nothing ever changed. Mm-hmm. But this generation that knew God was bigger mm-hmm. than their mindset were ready to go. And they walked into a newness, into a broader, bigger place.
Okay.
And that is what Joshua generation is.
How? Okay. And that makes so much sense. And audience, it's going to make even more sense the more we really delve deep right. into the doctrine, I suppose, of Joshua generation. So to jump into that, you recently renounced Christianity. So what is the biggest problem that you see with Christianity? And is the Christianity we see down here in the Bible Belt, would you consider that biblical?
I renounced Christianity because I feel like Christianity is a golden calf that has been fashioned after white nationalism, white supremacy, religious supremacy, and the doctrine is bullying and control. And we've seen that really recently in the political climate mm-hmm. in this country. Now, renouncing Christianity is one thing. I never renounced Christ. Mm-hmm. And there's a difference. Christianity does not look like Christ at all. There's nothing about modern day Christianity that reflects Christ and his words and his lessons and his morals and, mm-hmm. No, I don't believe that the Christianity that we see. And it's hard to, I don't want to make a blanket statement because mm-hmm. there are people out there that identify as Christian that are good people.
Yes.
And I don't want to put them all into this category, but I believe that as a whole, the title Christianity is cultish.
Well, in a way, do you feel like Christianity could be a microcosm for American society in a way too? Because when you say, it has lost its values, it has lost its way, it stands for white nationalism. There's a whole nother sect of the church, which is the one that I grew up in, where you would hear, now they're letting gays in, now they're becoming more accepting, they're, basically attacking churches becoming more progressive. Exactly. And changing their ideology and trying to look at the Bible in a broader context, I suppose. Yeah. So I want to leave this divided society. I can definitely understand. That's the thing. It's like people assume that people in my generation who have my beliefs hate America. But the thing is, I don't hate America. I just hate what's become of America.
Yes, exactly. And I don't hate Christianity. Right. I just hate what it has become.
Right.
And it's exciting to watch the churches become more open and affirming. And we're seeing it happen at a very quick rate. But the thing is clergy, they're fools if they're not watching the young people leave in droves, and the young people are the future of the church. So if you can't get the young people and the millennials and these people, you have nothing. The old people are gonna die in the wilderness while the Joshua generation goes into this new place.
And it's incredible because I remember at my baccalaureate service, whenever I graduated high school, they had a guest pastor come in. That was when I was still going to church. That was before I came down to college. But he said that, you know, statistically speaking, over 80% of people over the age of 18 never step foot back in a church. But I don't think. But the thing is, I don't remember much more about the message. I just remember being like, oh, well, that's not gonna be me. Like, and, but the thing is, I also remember that nothing in that message that he was giving offered any kind of solution that would be viable. It was more so like, well, you know, y'all just need to make sure that you're being harder on your kids to make sure that they know that they should just keep coming, you know, basically that idea. But yeah, it's statistically speaking, there's only so far that, or rather, and because churches don't pay any taxes and they require, you know, charity basically, they live off of donations, you know.
Yes.
It's not financially viable to keep losing all of these people because you just want to be stuck in a dogma of sorts. You know, it's one of those things where it's almost, you know, you go to seminary and then you have your bread and butter sermons and that's all you do until you die. You know?
Yeah, right. And not really bringing any change or transformation because it's all the same sermon over and over and over a different way. And that I started having a spiritual awakening and waking up from that, and I think the best way to describe it is I liberated God from the box of Christianity.
And I just want to let you know that there are going to be some listeners out there. That statement is a very huge statement. That is a huge statement to make, you know.
Yes.
It's a beautiful statement. I love it.
Yes.
But I know that there are some people who are going to be like, she liberated God
from Christianity. Well, in my, you know,
right.
I have that. Yes.
Right.
Because if I'm looking at God in a box, then I'm minimizing God's ability to, you know, be bigger than my ideas. I'm limiting God and not allowing God to blow my mind.
Yes.
And not allowing God to be infinite because I've put God in a finite box.
Yes.
And that's what I'm talking about. I released the hard lines of where I can find God.
Yes.
And decided that I can find God in everything if I open my eyes and see.
Yes. Which leads directly into my next question, which is, who or what is God to you? And how would you describe your relationship with God?
And there again, this is my basic belief. I believe that God is love and love is God. And I also believe that God is in everything and everything is in God. And I don't assume to limit God or define God because, and this is kind of hard to explain, but I think when we put labels on God and who God is, we minimize, there again, we put on some type of blinders. But when we allow God to be, just be, God, goddess, universe, you know, I mean, God is spirit and in everything. If you believe that God is the creator of everything, then you must believe that everything is a child of God.
Yes.
Not just everyone, everything. As an artist, when I create something, it's a part of me.
Yes, you pour
it has
yourself
my essence.
into it.
It has my soul. It has my spirit in it. Therefore, and if we looked at it that way, how would things change if we looked at everything as God? The world, we would take better care of the earth. We would solve so many issues because we could see. We would
definitely treat people better.
We would see the divine inside, yes.
Yeah. How profound. So when we were discussing this episode, you told me that JGCC became the UnCHURCH.
Yes.
What have been some personal, organizational, and spiritual challenges of unchurching? Which, by the way, just quickly define unchurching for my audience.
Well, I wrestled with church because, a lot of abuse happens, a lot of rejection happens, especially to the LGBTQ community. So the idea of in church, getting people to church and getting young people, making it somewhere they would want to be, because church is not somewhere that people want to be much anymore.
Yes.
And so I kept talking to God, and I'm like, what can we do? And I knew that there was something bigger that we had to do. And I was speaking with I was standing in the shower, and unCHURCH came to me, and I went, and that was like, and it was like a one of those mind-blowing moments. I went straight to my associate pastor, Chris Dufresne, and I said, Chris, I've got to tell you what I feel like Spirit is showing me. And I shared the idea with him, and he said, that is brilliant. Like, unCHURCH, and unbiased, unconditional, unafraid.
Yes.
All those things. And Chris said, I love this. And so we were both, for the first time in a long time, felt life. Because we felt that mundane, okay, we're coming in here and we're really just writing sermons, and we're really not, we were stuck. We weren't really making any real change.
Yeah.
And you can't be a true minister, in my opinion, and not want to transform things and bring about change and shine light, and we were stuck. At any rate, I texted him a couple of Sundays later, and I said, I'm going to introduce the unCHURCH. I'm going to launch the unCHURCH vision today. And Chris texted me back, and he said, they're not ready. They're not ready for that. And I said, well, sink or swim.
Yeah.
And so, I went in and, I preached this sermon about the unCHURCH and unchurching the church, unleashing God, basically. Unleashing God from the boundaries and the walls of the church. And, it was not received well. There was a few that were like, this is, but not, it was not. There was a lot of people. And it did what it was supposed to do. I think it challenged,
yes,
our beliefs. Not beliefs as much as it shined a light on our own biases.
Yes.
Religious biases.
Yes.
That were still there.
Yes.
That we are imprisoned by.
Yes.
And those religious biases not only imprison us, but it causes us to reject others and judge and criticize others. Mm-hmm. And that's what I want to remove. That's what I want people to see and understand. It is our religious biases, those hard lines that we draw, that fracture us. And it shouldn't be there.
What you have described to me just kind of makes me think of almost like a spiritual coming out.
Yeah. Because,
you take that deep breath, and at that point you're just like, whoever is going to be with me is going to be with me, and whoever is going to be against me is going to be against me. This is just the easiest way for me to sort it all out.
Exactly. And that's what it was. And I lost. When I tell you I lost, a lot of people left. Mm-hmm. A lot of people left. And I knew that they would. And I was okay with that. I knew that, God, I was looking around one day and I said, oh my gosh, this is just really falling apart. And God basically said it had to.
Yeah.
It had to. You want the walls to come down? They have to fall. And I had a dream way back, right after when I first, went into ministry, and I was in my former church, and in my dream, and I walked down to the altar, and God was there, and I knew God was there. I couldn't see God, but I knew God was there. And I sat down, and God had a pen, and the pen was black. And God spoke to me and said, this is what I want you to preach. And as God wrote with the black pen, the words were red. And it said, giving God's word wings. And I looked up, and the sanctuary, the walls were gone. And the big stained glass windows were just blowing in the wind. And the wind was blowing through the sanctuary, and I could see the streets, and I could see the people and the diversity. And I feel like that's where we are unleashing God. I feel like giving God's word wings. I feel like that is a butterfly in the transformation of the church. And I believe that's what this is.
Fascinating stuff. Let's take a quick break, but we will be right back to discuss more with Dear. Hello, everybody. The following is a small list of places you can donate for Black lives and the lives of all people of color all across the United States. National Bailout, the Bail Project, Mutual Aid, the Navajo Water Project, My Block, My Hood, My City, Resist, Black Table Arts, Embrace Race, Social Justice Learning Institute, Black Feminist Project, Integrate NYC, Black Girls Code, Pretty Brown Girl, The Winter Institute, Ramp Your Voice with Valissa, Autistic People of Color Fund, Sins Invalid, ACLU, Black Lives Matter Global Network, Color of Change Education Fund, Anti-Racism Fund, the Refugee Dream Center, Alliance to Mobilize Our Resistance, Black Voters Matter Fund, the Collective Political Action Committee, the National Police Accountability Project, Campaign Zero, Communities United for Police Reform, Equal Justice Initiative, No New Jails NYC, Anti-Recidivism Coalition, Legal Rights Center, Transgender Law Center Black LGBTQIA+ Migrant Project, Up Against the Law Legal Collective, Black Trans Advocacy Coalition, The Okra Project, Brave Space Alliance, Trans Justice Funding Project, the Loveland Foundation, Black Women for Wellness, National Queer and Trans Therapists of Color Network, National Black Disability Coalition, Sister Song, Navajo and Obi Families COVID-19 Relief Fund, Orinda Tribe COVID Response, and Dinahosoto Families COVID-19 Relief Fund. There are many, many more, and they all need our help. So donate, volunteer, and do what you can for the future of people of color in this country. If the system won't, we will, because none of us are free until all of us are free. Alright guys, let's talk about Anchor, the free app that I'm using to make this podcast happen. They give you all of the creative tools you need to edit your podcast right from your phone or computer, which is great whenever you're doing it in the middle of a closet like me. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more, which removes a lot of hassle. And best of all, you can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast all in one place. So download the free Anchor app today or go to anchor.fm to get started. And we're back with the Reverend Brandiilyne Mangum-Dear, my very special friend BB. So we were just talking about the Unchurching sermon, which was a big shakeup for your church where you are the head pastor. But I'm curious, because now unchurching is kind of your current mission, I would say, huh?
Yes.
Your MO of sorts. Do you have a relationship or communication with any other local pastors?
Oh, yes. I mean, being involved in activism, there are several pastors that I work with in activism. You know, we work together, Black Lives Matter, things like that. So, yes, there are. Mm-hmm. Sure.
Do you ever discuss these beliefs with these pastors?
No, I've not really sat down and had a conversation
Mm-hmm.
about it with any other pastor, except for, you know, my staff.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. But you're trying to, I guess in a way, you're trying to keep it strictly business when it
Yes.
comes to the activist side of things. You know, it's more so about, it's not necessarily about your doctrines, it's more so about what
Yes.
you can accomplish together.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So I know that you had faced some adversity within the church, within your own church, because of unchurching. Have you faced any other adversity as a result? Has that spread outwards?
Oh, absolutely. For sure. I mean, because I'm very vocal about it and I, you know, speak about it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I get pushback from people and people call, a heretic. I think that's the number one thing I'm called. And that's okay. You know, you can call me what you like, but
Right, it's like, I mean, I can understand why you would call me a heretic, but, you know, like,
Right.
I'm not.
And the thing about it is, you know, I finally got to the point where it didn't bother me. It used to bother me, and I was, you know, I had that fear that is so deeply embedded into us through the doctrines and dogmas that we're taught, especially as a queer person in the church. These fears were just, they haunted me.
Uh-huh.
And I finally got to a place where I feel like I was liberated from that fear. And when I found that perfect love, you know, Scripture says perfect love casts out fear. And when I accepted that perfect love and was open to it, I really feel like when people say those things, it doesn't affect me anymore.
I was gonna say, so I guess what people need to understand about your ideas of God and what you're doing right now is not something, I guess the big idea is that, you know, people, naysayers and people who don't understand would say things like, well, this is you shaping God in your own image, you know, how you want to see God. But really, this whole time, you have given yourself up to God and you're just taking the ride. And as this ride goes on, you're discovering more and more that you didn't know was true, or, you know, rather, it's revealing more to you.
Yes, because I'm open to it. And I will say, when I speak and when I preach, I usually say I don't believe in absolute truth.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not here to, what I'm saying to you, I do not expect you to believe me absolutely. I'm giving you this perspective. I'm giving you this new information for you to take.
Mm-hmm.
You can research it. You can toss it out. You can keep it. I want you to make up your own mind.
Mm-hmm.
And create your own belief system. God spoke very clearly to me and said to me, I am who I am. And that's what God said to Moses in the burning bush.
Mm-hmm.
And God said to me, I am who I am to this person.
Mm-hmm.
I am who I am to this person, and I am who I am to that person. And it's really none of your business how I choose to reveal myself to my people. I am big enough to be all of those things. I didn't tell you to judge them or change them. I told you to love them. That's it.
Point blank, period.
Yes. Pass the plate, please.
So, how would you address somebody who says that you can't be a Christ follower and be LGBTQ+, or that you can't be Christian and believe in magic? And here's that word magic we're going to get into in the next question, but let's keep it to this one. Which last season I asked Cameron Petrie in my third episode, Queerness and Christianity Coexisting. I asked him, the exact same question. So how would you, BB, as a pastor, address somebody who believes you can't be a Christian and LGBT?
Introduce myself. Hi, I'm Brandiilyne. I'm a follower of Christ, and I'm a lesbian. It's nice to meet you. You just found your first unicorn. I say to them, you obviously don't know the Christ that I know.
Mm-hmm.
And the love of Christ, the unconditional love of Christ that I know. And I pray that one day you find that as I have, and many in the LGBTQ community have. As far as magic, and I love using this word, I love that you brought this up, because the word magic is the same to me as the Holy Spirit. I believe that we are all magical, divine beings.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, I believe that a lot of the dogmas were created and those hard walls and boundaries and control doctrines were created because they recognized that we were magical divine beings, and Christ came to show us how to operate in that beautiful spirit that we are. And so they don't want us to know that, and so they've created these dogmas and doctrines and limits, and things like that. So I believe that we are all magical, and I believe that it's bigger than our ideas of it.
100%. I mean, there's almost like this cognitive dissonance in the mainstream church where, on one hand, like, don't practice witchcraft, but then on another hand, it's like, well, witchcraft, I mean, that's not even real. Like, that's just hocus pocus. And then, like, there's somewhere in between where it's like, well, you have to acknowledge, the Ark of the Covenant, the Dead Sea Scrolls, all of these all of these ancient artifacts. You watch Indiana Jones, they're imbued with power, holy power. It's like, how could it possibly be out of the realm of possibility that there is something metaphysical in this world that, once again, was engineered by the universe, God, whatever you want to call it,
right? I mean, Jesus, spit in mud and put it in a blind man's eye and healed him. And then Jesus says later, you will do all of these things and even more than I can, even more than I do. And so, the church speaks of the power and speaks of the gifts, if that's what you want to call it, but they don't really follow through with a practical way of tapping into that divine part of ourselves.
Yes.
The church focuses mostly on how to control your flesh.
Yes.
So all of the energy is put into make sure you're a good person and you don't operate in the flesh, and your whole spirit side, the whole spirit part of yourself is really ignored because you're spending all of your time trying not to sin.
Yes.
So
going right along, you're an activist, you're a pastor, and you're also a business owner.
Yes.
You own the Red Jasper, which, first-time listeners, if this is your first time here, BB, would you mind telling us what the Red Jasper is, and when did you decide to open it?
The Red Jasper, we are a crystal / metaphysical / spiritual supply shop. I started having a spiritual awakening, and I started studying Reiki and got involved with Reiki healing and started working with the stones. And Susan and I went to Disneyland, and we spent more money in the crystal shops than we did in the parks. And so I looked at Susan and I said, we're in the wrong business. We need to come and open a shop. There's nowhere like it. And literally came home and opened a shop. Very small.
I remember.
Very very bad location, but we opened it, and within a year we moved to a much larger location, which is where we are now. And it's just flourished, and people are and this is the best experience for me, and this has helped me just hearing people talking about their spiritual practice and their spiritual beliefs. And I want to say this. I listen to people tell me about their beliefs and their spiritual practice, and as they're telling me these things, I see the joy and I see the peace and I see the happiness that they have found in their spiritual work and their spiritual path. And when I see that, I go to the scripture that talks about the fruit of the Spirit, and I can't separate the two. I mean, if you have joy and peace and love and all these wonderful things in your spiritual path, though it's different from mine, that is the Spirit of the Lord. And that's how I kind of came to the conclusion of, well, it's, we're much bigger than...
Right. Well, I mean, and, well, I guess this kind of goes into my next question, which is, does being an activist and a pastor bleed into being a business owner? But, in my head, I can see where it's like, this is just another part of you being an active part of the community and another way to help you accomplish your goals.
Yes, and I try to be very careful and try to keep them separate. But I'm in the media a lot. Anytime if you might see me in front of a courthouse, speaking against, white supremacy and, things like that. And you might, see me, suing the governor because we did that too, fighting HB 1523. So all that was national news, and I don't bring politics and things like that into the shop. I don't feel like they belong here. So if people want to talk about it, I'll talk about it with them. But
yeah. So how has COVID affected your work?
We closed down for a couple of weeks, and then we went online mostly. We went online for the couple of weeks that we were closed down. We were terrified. I remember crying when I heard they shut us down, and I remember crying, and I said, Susan, this is everything. What are we going to do? And she said, we'll figure it out. And we went online and started making malas, prayer beads, and we were selling the prayer beads, and we would, different things from the shop, and we were shipping. Our customers stepped up and were so supportive and really were just like, and they really helped us. And then we opened back up and did curbside, and then we were able to open because we are a spiritual supply store, so we were able to open before a lot of the other places. And when I tell you, business was great. People were coming because they needed the shop. They needed that spiritual place, and it was, I think, the Red Jasper became a sanctuary for a lot of people during COVID, and it was really great to see it and be able to provide it.
Yes.
And not I don't know. It was an oasis to a lot of people spiritually during that time, and for me as well. So yeah.
This wasn't on my list of questions and talking points, but I mean, it begs the question: what has your experience as a queer business owner in the South been like?
Well, actually, it's been okay because I am the owner of a metaphysical shop in the middle of Mississippi. But the community's huge. The community is so big. The magical community, the queer community. No one at this point. I haven't had any issues. Well, I mean, I've had some issues with some crazy, religious zealots, but not much. Not much. Just a couple of,
Well, and being in Hattiesburg, which is, I always say, is like the Portland of Mississippi.
It is.
So, you're not easily going to see people who are vocally adverse to you being a queer woman.
Right.
So would you care to let me and my audience in on what you have planned for the future of Joshua Generation and the Red Jasper?
Joshua Generation, it's evolving. We let our building go due to COVID because it was just too expensive. And so what we've done is we are meeting in the park in Hattiesburg, downtown, when the weather permits. We're just doing that. And we're also doing a podcast, and we're taking this sermon and discussing it, in a deeper way. I went on a sabbatical for 3 months, and I just came out of my sabbatical in January. And my goal is and this is what I told my associate pastor, Holly Ladner. I said, I want to go on a hunt for the Christ in unusual places outside of the Bible. I want to find,
Yeah.
And so what we're doing is we're exploring different beliefs and different paths, and we're discussing, like I really dove into Kabbalah when I was on my sabbatical, and I really connected with that. And so we've looked at some of that. Last week we looked at the Tao and Buddhism and different things, and stirred up a lot during the conversation. But we do it live on Facebook, so you're kind of open up to a lot of things. But I'm so sorry. It's Kabbalah? Kabbalah.
Okay, I've been pronouncing it Kabbalah this whole time.
Well, a lot of people say Kabbalah, and that's okay. It's just banana banana, I suppose.
Well, I didn't mention it earlier, but when you had kind of talked about the idea of oneness, that's all that Kabbalah is. Is how everything is connected. And audience, you can't see this unfortunately, but BB has divine geometry on her, tattooed on her, which ties kind of right in to that same idea,
right?
So cool stuff. The red jasper, anything, y'all used to have psychic fairs, and there is a pandemic raging still right now. I cannot wait for the next time that y'all can do that. Have you considered doing potentially like a virtual one? Would that work virtually? I
haven't figured that out. I'm not sure. I believe that things are coming. I think things are gonna start to get better soon, and I think we can wait. I think it'll be okay to wait. And but I am doing an art project, and I'm calling we're bringing the spiritual pieces together, and I'm hoping to do that after the pandemic as well. So that's going to be hopefully we can get that together soon. But our psychic fairs, we almost planned one, and then the numbers spiked, and we can't do it.
Yeah.
But we hope to expand. We hope we've kind of outgrown this building.
Yes, I was going to say, I mean, it almost seems, your rise is very meteoric from an outsider's perspective. It seems like every single time you step up, the next step appears not too long after.
Yeah, I hope that we can, I have a lot of ideas and plans for the red jasper, so I hope that we can expand. So that's our goal.
So, there goes my foot. So BB, if you could go back in time and tell young BB any words of wisdom or comfort, what would they be?
Take notes, girl. Take notes. You're gonna need this. Nothing. I would allow her to. Yeah, nothing.
Really?
And I'll tell you why. Because, especially with Kabbalah and studying Kabbalah, I believe that we are born into the family that we're born into. Things happen that are supposed to happen to get us to a place where we are stronger and better and healed and in the right place. And I do believe that every single thing that I went through as a child, teenager, everything, they were necessary. And if I go back and say anything to young BB, it may throw things off. And I believe that those life lessons, I believe they're all necessary. So I wouldn't, nothing. Yeah.
Okay. Well, BB, it has been so fantastic. But before we go, do you have any shout outs, anything you need to advertise, anywhere people can go to see more of your stuff, see more about the Red Jasper, more about Joshua Generation, or even your activism?
Absolutely. Joshua Generation Community Church. We have a Facebook page. All of my sermons are on there. They're all in the archives. We also have a YouTube channel. It's Joshua Generation, the UnCHURCH, I think. I'm not the one that does that. I have a someone that takes care of that for me. We have, of course, the Red Jasper has a Facebook page and a Instagram. We have Joshua Generation has an Instagram as well. So all of our stuff is there. And we have a website, joshuageneration.rocks, R-O-C-K-S. And I guess you could just Google my name if you wanted to find out about the activism and things like that, because it's all there. It's we've done a lot in the last several years. So, but yeah, that's about it.
Well, Bibi, thank you so much. Please have a lovely day, and we cannot wait to see you again.
Oh, thank you.